Our next performer is someone who has been to Dodo Modern Poets before, and she's one of the premier organisers and movers and shakers in London poetry, really. She publishes collections of poetry, including her own, some of which are here tonight. She organises Loose Muse, which is on the second Wednesday of every month. And remind me of the venue, Agnes?
It's here.
Oh, it's here, right, okay.
This very place.
It's at this very place, okay.
And can I just add, it's London's only women's writers' night.
Yes, okay, I think you all heard that. So London's only women's writers performance space, is that right? Night, okay, good. And now the good news about Loose Muse is that they've just got Arts Council funding, so things are looking really good. So I'd like to welcome Agnes Meadows, please, to Dodo Modern Poets here tonight.
I thank you all. Oh, just a sec. Too many bits and pieces. There.
Do you want to clear a bit of space on the table? So...
No, it's all right.
Yeah? Okay.
Just talk amongst yourselves. The next loose news, not loose mouse, not loose moose, but loose muse, is on the 9th of November. If anybody wants to come along, men are welcome, but only women can read. But if you're a guy and you want to read, you have to call yourself Susan and wear a wig. Okay. I thought in this first set I'd read some stuff that I haven't had published, and then in the second set I'd read from my books. This is called, I lived in Istanbul for a while, this is called Istanbul Moments. By the Blue Mosque, under a canopy of trees bright orange in October, and the smile of the day at its broadest, I sit in a stone garden surrounded by sun-blanched statues and mute-edged ivy that daggers a living frieze upon the ancient blooded bricks. The comfort of fountains and birdsong blunts the city's underlying rumble, sun my drowsy companion as I stretch into silence. And then the muezzin calls for afternoon prayers, his cry tossing across the city like an unwrapped gift, his song reflected in a living turbulence of voices, all greeting the hour in a turmoil of mirrored harmony. I'm strangely moved, as if this singing has released some faint echo of love within me that has been latched tight for centuries. It is the moment to think about God. It is the one moment. It is 5 o'clock. The light grows golden, stippling Topkapi trees, and all along the Bosphorus the minarets of 100 mosques needle the sky. The muezzin's plaintive call covering the city, a gleaming pathway from earth to heavens. Smoke feathers upwards from countless chestnut bonfires, marking the air with impossible fragrance. And date-eyed children, made solemn by poverty, sell gum and handkerchiefs to indifferent husbands and their shark-eyed wives, women who speak the subtle language of the glancing look. Imagine passion's caravanserai, the touch of honeyed hands, the love beyond reason all yearn for in the quietness of dreams, their faces, marble tombs of unspoken regret. The water twists in pale turquoise pleats beneath Galata Bridge, past grizzled fishermen who know there's nothing left to catch, spending empty nodded hours, hooking the memory of fin or scale, waiting as dusk falls for the miracle of fish. Thank you. I was in Greece on holiday during the summer, and while I was there, the very ancient father of the man who owned the taverna I was staying in died. So I wrote this poem. It's called Old Nikos' Death. The bells have been ringing all morning across the white mirror sea. Old Nikos died at 10 last night. It had been a long illness. He was old, well past his 80th year. It was his time, they said. The funeral will be this afternoon before sunset. Not unseemly haste, but necessity. In the Aegean, it is too hot in June for the dead to linger. He will be buried in the cemetery on the hilltop overlooking the town of his boyhood, beyond the owl-grey olive groves, the scarlet clash of azalea on every corner above that wine-dark sea. Tonight the family will gather, the women no longer beating their breasts in grief, but spent and solemn, the men henna-eyed with unshed tears. They will be bedraggled and unshaven, summer dust gathered in the crease of morning black, casting shadows in the curve of every iron mouth. In the taverna they will gather, unravelling sons and aged brothers, grandsons barely out of teens, someone's ancient wizened wife. A tidal wave of condolences will immobilise them, the good grace of custom. They will talk until the early hours, exchange stories, smile sometimes in cobwebbed recollection. Candles will be lit to guide Nikos' soul to paradise. A life well lived, a difference made. Thank you. Some of you will know, last year, I lived in Singapore for 6 months, which was unquestionably one of the most surreal experiences of my life. It really was, and it was very sweaty and hot. And I don't think I've ever come across such miserable young people. They were really unhappy, very well off. All of them had everything, all the iPods and the computers and all the bits and pieces, but really unhappy. So I wrote about that a couple of times. And this first poem is as a result of a conversation I had with one of my students, who was a very young teenage girl, and I understand from her that about 20% of all teenage girls in Singapore cut themselves, which is pretty horrific. Anyway, this is called Badge of Honour. She rolled up her shirt sleeves with a flourish, the transparent illusion of pleasure in her smile, showed me a criss-cross armful of phantom scars, thin white wheels ephemeral as spiders' tracks. Stronger than chains or the poetry of reason, each mark was a badge of honour on her honey mustard skin, a tattoo of despair, a day bearing witness to the silence of collusion, a key that had unlocked the black dog in her heart. Somewhere in her shark-flat eyes, old shadows stirred, eddied briefly to life like currents hidden beneath the pale reflecting pool of her face, tamed by indifference, subdued by fright, the creak of floorboards, the whispered hello, the urgency of mouth and tongue, the bruises like exclamation marks on thighs and wrists, the teacher who had frowned in recognition then hurried away regardless, the church warden who had asked no questions. One day, when I'm older, she said, voice high and light as a child's, I want to help women, girls, or like kids who have been abused, by their fathers, or maybe their brothers. Yeah, like maybe their brothers. And this is another one about unhappy Singapore kids. And then I'll go on something lighter, honest. This is called Yellow Lines, because in Singapore, when you get on the incredibly efficient metro system, there are yellow lines, and you can't step across these yellow lines. For your safety, do not step across the yellow lines. At night, I hear the thin violin wail of desperate children caught in their dreamless terror of the hive. Their voices scratch the wet air outside my window, sift through the trees like spectral foliage seeking the sanctuary of reconnection. In spiteful daylight, they remain joyless and unsmiling, their eyes barely scratching the surface of engagement, bloodless and brooding, battalions of manga boys and their insect-buzzed girlfriends, doe-eyed and smooth-skinned, prowling this city's manicured streets and litter-free doorways, treasure hunting the honesty of love beyond the wire. In the entrapment of endless plenty, they screech like abandoned creatures, lost in a wilderness of starless nights. A nation of latchkey kids who communicate in chip and pin sentences, iPod their emotions into flatline acceptance, catching each other's glance as briefly as firefly lightning, as if too much contact would cause damage, educated against the probability of emotional contamination, for their safety, always standing behind the yellow lines. This is for Patrick, because you read a couple of things about rain. The rain in Singapore, you would not believe the rain in Singapore. It rains every day. This is a kind of little funny poem, kind of thing, called Rain Stops Play. Rain marches through the city like an invading army. A cloudburst battalion, rough as barrack room humour, sturdy as combat boots, rattling rooftops like pebbles in a tin plate, rendering men and women invisible. Downtown streets are suddenly an elemental war zone, buildings and pavements crushed beneath the baritone growl of living thunder. The moneymakers shelter, subdued and unsmiling, powerless refugees held to ransom by the occupying maelstrom. Thank you. I loved the idea that all of these bankers, these moneymakers who are fearless, wouldn't go out in the rain because they were literally standing there, oh, it's wet. And this happened to me on one of the metros one afternoon. It's called Little Dumpling Face. Little Dumpling Face, her eyes like raisins, stretches up sticky rice fingers to yank my trousered leg in passing. Smiling is inevitable. Spaghetti straight hair fringes her smooth features, her solemn questioning glance transfixing me with its gravity. Grandma grumbles self-conscious apologies, capturing her child's jubilant searching fingers in her own age-mottled hands. Little red bean, a plum blossom unopened, a melody waiting for orchestration. Your smile engraves its worth upon my day. Now then, this is the poem that I wrote, not for Sylvia Plath, but this is how I think Sylvia Plath should have reacted to Ted Hughes. And it's called Wednesday. She woke alone, time and again, he still not home. The light on the stair, tired of burning, weak with waiting. And when he finally returned, night after night, scratched and grinning, a tomcat yowling at elusive cloud-bruised moons tarnished with illicit passion, he would fall into an instant, unremorseful sleep, his dreams a Scheherazade of consummations into which he vanished without trace. In the darkness, she would sniff his skin, hunting out duplicity, the cheap scent of betrayal fogging her nostrils, the gleam of foreign sweat polishing limbs glossed by alien hands, whose ardent nails had carved multi-tracks of lust upon his back, a tangled web of treachery that brought the bile rising to her lips. She would lay awake, heart scythed and screaming, tongue trapped behind her teeth, words castrated in her mouth, while he slept, curled and nestled like a puppy. In the morning, her breath would be sour with anguish, lungs thin and rattling as a corpse in its final moments. This was not the love of fairy tales she seethed, but a changeling, viper-bred love whose forked tongue slithered silent through sleep to leave her snarling in vituperous. In her winter of discontent, unhappiness had become a habit, a shroud holding her fast, emotions immobilized. Yet still she clung to the desire of the dream, of love unpetrified and days of kindness without cost, unwilling to relinquish the illusion. Loneliness turned slowly into sorrow. transforming over seasons to ice-pricked ire, making her weep on buses, or in the middle of the day when she might look up, catch sight of autumn's first brown leaf sifting through sunlight, a foliate clock marking her solitary time. The dream slipped inexorably away. She turned her face to the wall, became a shadow leaden with loss. Ideas come from moments of transformation. Rage begets resolution, resolve coagulated in her heart. She became patient, a compliant wife, her lips a parenthesis of submission. She would kill him, she thought, on a Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. A superb reading. We've been from Margate to Haworth to Greece and to Singapore, and so hopefully the travels will continue in the second half. We're going to take a 20-minute break. There are books to look at, but do refresh your glasses. We'll see you in 20 minutes. So more applause for Agnes Meadows, please.